Hello viewers, I welcome you all at Shubhra Ranjan IAS. Today is another episode of our series on international and regional organization. In this episode, we will cover the International Court of Justice, one of the major principal organ of the United Nations. So this is the building, or also known as the Peace Palace, where the International Court of Justice is situated. So let's start for today's session. Moving on to the basics. So first we will learn some of the basic facts related to the International Court of Justice. So it is also known as the World Court because it resolves the disputes among the nations. So whenever there is a dispute among nations, so where they will go? They will go to the International Court of Justice. So it is an ultimate court in the world. It is the highest court in the world, you can say. So that's why it's also known as World Court. Principal judicial organ of the UN, established in 1945 under the UN Charter and started working in April 1946. Why in April 1946? Because prior to ICJ, PCIJ was there, Permanent Court of International Justice, which was established under the League of Nations. And when finally PCIJ was dissolved in 1946, and then ICJ started working as a world court. Location: The Hague, Netherlands. So it is important to note here that it is the only organ of the UN which is not situated in the New York, United States. It is only one organ which is situated outside the New York. Other organs, they have headquarter or they have their location in the New York, United States. So as a one mock objective, it can come, which one of the following UN organ is not located in the New York, United States? So your answer would be ICJ. Then number of judges, total 15 judges. ICJ have total 15 judges at a time. Official language, English and French, two official language. So this can also come as a one mark objective. What are the official languages of the ICJ? As we know, UN have 6 official languages, but ICJ only have 2 official languages. Then successor of the PCIJ. I already told you that PCIJ was established under the League of Nations and ultimately it was succeeded by ICJ in 1946. So I hope the basics are clear to you, and now moving further, we will look at the distribution of judges. So I told you ICJ has total 15 judges, but how they are distributed over the world, right? It's not like the US have 5 judges and China has 3 judges and Australia has 2 judges and Europe has 1 judge. The distribution has made regional wise, right? So first, Western Europe and other states have 5 judges. So 5 seats are reserved for Western Europe and other states. Then 3 are for Asia, 3 for Africa, 2 for Eastern Europe and 2 for Latin America and Caribbean region. So this is the distribution. So 3 judges will be from Africa, 3 from Asia, 2 from Eastern Europe, 2 from Latin America and Caribbean region. And who has the maximum numbers of seat reserves? Western Europe and other states. For them, total number of seats reserved are 5. So 5 judges will be from Western Europe and other states. So do remember this from your exam perspective, that how many seats are allocated to a particular region. Now coming to the ICJ judges. So we know there are 15 judges in ICJ. Their distribution is made on regional wise. They have like particular seats are reserved for a particular region. But now we will cover the basic facts and how they are elected and what are their powers, functions, etc. judges. So first of all, 15 judges in ICJ, International Court of Justice, and tenure 9 years. So each judge will have a tenure of 9 years. Then elected by the UNGA and UNSC. So they are elected by both UNGA and UNSC but separately. So don't get confused here that UNSC and UNGA combined and they both together. They both elected the judges but separately. Absolute majority means more than 50%. So for a person to elected as the judge of the ICJ, he or she needs to win from the absolute majority both in the UNGA as well as UNSC. So I would like to here tell you that what is the difference between absolute majority and simple majority. So absolute majority is more than 50% of the total, like 50% and 1. Let's suppose there are 100 seats in the UNGA, for example. So for a person to be elected as a judge, he or she needs 51 votes, right? But in simple majority, present and voting, how many are present, and from their voting we decide the majority. But absolute majority, all the members present and voting. So do remember here difference between absolute and simple majority. Then these judges are eligible for re-election as well. For example, if you complete a tenure of 9 years, if one judge complete his or her first tenure, he can also contest election for the second tenure. It is important to note here that this can also come as a 1 mark objective, that 5 of the 15 judges are elected every 3 years to ensure continuity. To maintain continuity in the ICJ, 1/3 of the judges are elected every 3 years. One more important point I would like here to tell you that no country can have two judges at a time. For example, presently in India's judge at the ICJ is Dalveer Bhandari. He is representing India at the ICJ. So India can't have two judges at the same time. Only one judge from one country. Okay. So if there are 15 judges in the ICJ, so they all are from 15 different nations. No two judges can be from the same nation. So like all other organs of the UN, ICJ also has president and vice president. So president and vice president are elected by the member of the court. So कोर्ट के मेंबर जो हैं वो उन्हें इलेक्ट करते हैं every 3 years for a tenure of 3 years by secret ballot and absolute majority. Again, absolute majority is followed here. Current president of the ICJ is Joan E. Donog. She belongs to the United States. Here is her picture. Then the vice president is Judge Kirill Gavogin. He is an Russian. There is his picture. So like other organs, this organ also has president as well as vice president. You can, for you from exam perspective, remembering the name of president is important. Vice president is not that important. Moving on to the Indian judge at the ICJ. So Justice Dalveer Bhandari, he is an Indian and he represent India at the ICJ. So he was born on 1st October 1947, comes from a family of lawyers. So his whole family is in the profession of law. Then studied humanities and law from Jodhpur University, practiced law at the Rajasthan High Court from 1968 to 1970, appointed as the judge in Delhi High Court in 1991, and Chief Justice of Bombay High Court also he served there. October 2005, elevated to the Supreme Court as a judge. So he was a judge in the Supreme Court as well. So don't get confused here whether he was a Chief Justice of India or a judge in the Supreme Court. He was a judge in the Supreme Court. Then sworn in as a member of ICJ in 2012. So in 2012 he joined the ICJ. 2014 conferred with Padma Bhushan. Padma Bhushan भी इनको दिया गया, which is the third highest civilian award in India. Then gave a separate judgment on Kulbhushan Jadhav case. So you all must be knowing about the Kulbhushan Jadhav case, which was in ICJ. India filed a petition in ICJ regarding Kulbhushan Jadhav case because Pakistan has arrested him from Iran and was saying that he is a spy or some. So he gave a separate judgment on that case as well. And I would like to tell you here that he was not showing biasness here, or he did not go against the rule. It is provided in the UN Charter that any judge can give a separate judgment on any case. So he just followed the UN Charter rule and he gave the judgment in favor of India. And why his case is important, Justice Dalveer Bhandari case is important, because when he was contesting election for the membership of ICJ, then against him was UK judge Greenwood, and he defeated him. Like, it is a victory for India, like UK judge, UK contestant, because UK, you all know, is a veto power nation, P5 nation, and defeating their candidate is a major diplomatic win for India. This also shows the India's growing profile in the international arena. Moving on to the parties to the ICJ. So who all can become the member of the ICJ, or who all can file the petition there, or can go there, or can seek ICJ for their dispute resolvement. So first is UN members. So all the UN members, they automatically become the members of the ICJ as well. So we all know that UN have 193 member states, and they all 193 are members of the ICJ as well. Then non-UN members, suppose if there is another nations or other members, they are not the member of the United Nations, but they want to go to the ICJ for their dispute settlement. So they have a separate procedure mentioned in the statute of the court, so they will follow that procedure and become the member of the ICJ. Then only they can seek the legal help from the court. So kindly remember this, who are all the parties on the ICJ. Then jurisdiction of the ICJ. So basically two types of jurisdiction. First is contentious and second is advisory. So contentious is binding and advisory is non-binding. What it means here, that in a contentious matter, contentious is basically among states. Okay, so when two states go to the ICJ for their dispute settlement, so legal dispute settlement, so ICJ gave a verdict, then they have to follow that verdict because they signed the jurisdiction that this verdict will be binding. So you have to follow the final decision or final verdict of the court. But in case of advisory, it is non-binding. Advisory means the UN organs or countries or UN specialized agencies or other affiliated agencies, they go to the ICJ to they ask ICJ for some advice, for some legal advice, that how they can proceed further or what should follow in the particular matter. So in that case, ICJ can give the advisory opinion, but it is non-binding. Whether that agency wanted to follow it or not, it is up to that agency. It is not binding. But in case of contentious matter, it is binding. Then functions of the ICJ. ICJ settles legal disputes between nations only. So kindly remember, between nations only. For example, between India and Pakistan, India and China, China and US, all that. Not between individual organizations, enterprises. So it is not like the for example, Reliance and Pakistan have some issue. For example, just in case, so they can't go to the ICJ because it only settles legal disputes among nations only, right? Not between organizations, not between individuals, and not between enterprises, right? Then court can only hear a dispute when requested to do so by one or more state. It cannot deal initiate with the dispute on its own. So whenever there is a dispute, right, the judges are seeing, they are reading in the paper, they are watching news, but they can't initiate the case on its own. Like, we will look after this, who is right, who is wrong, so please come and join, give your facts related, how, why this is happening or that. They can't. They can only hear a dispute when a states or nations ask them to do so. On their own, they don't have the authority to initiate a dispute or to initiate a case on its own. To give advisory opinions on legal questions referred to it by the UN organs and specialized agencies. So as I mentioned you in the previous slide, that advisory opinions are non-binding. So for example, ECOSOC, UNSC, they need some advice. So they can go to the ICJ, ask for advice, and ICJ will give the advice as per the law, as per the rule, but it is up to them whether they want to follow that advice or not. So these are non-binding in nature, whereas any final verdict or any final judgment in disputes matter, in contentious matters, it is binding, right? That nations have to follow that, but in other case they are not binding. Then decision and advisory opinions are by majority, and in an event of an equal division, the vote of ICJ president becomes decisive. So whenever there is a final verdict or there is a judgment, so which judgment shall prevail, because 15 judges, they might have different opinions, different suggestions regarding. So but in that case also majority prevails, and suppose if there is a tie, then the vote of the president becomes decisive, then the final decision comes from the vote of the president of the ICJ, right? So it is important also from your exam perspective, one more question can come, that in an event of an equal division, the vote of the ICJ presidents becomes decisive. So whose vote becomes decisive in an case of an equal division? You can write there ICJ's president. And who is the current president? I already told you, from the United States, right? Moving on to the next in continuation, what are the functions of the ICJ? Opinions provided by the court in advisory proceedings are not binding in nature. I have already told you. Then ICJ discharges duties as a full court. However, at the request of parties, it may also establish ad hoc chambers to examine these specific cases. Although it fully completes or discharges duties as a full court, but if some parties, or if sometimes parties or nations, they request, then it can also establish ad hoc chambers to look into the specific cases. Then judgment of the ICJ. It is most important to understand here how the judgment, final judgment, how the nations follow, and what is the authority under the charter. So when ICJ gave a verdict, suppose, I will give you example here. Suppose there is a case in ICJ between India and Pakistan, and India won that case, right? India wins. Now Pakistan can say like, I will not follow the judgment, this that, right? Whatever ICJ say, it is biased, this that, blah blah, right? But how the UN can ensure that nations are following the judgment, or you can say the judgments are binding, how the binding principle can be ensured, right? So in the UN charter it is mentioned that all the judgments of the ICJ must be enforced by the UNSC. So UNSC again most important organ of the United Nations with veto power, right? So if suppose in case of contentious matter, if one party does not oblige to the verdict, then UNSC can enforce that binding, that verdict, but judgment enforcement subject to veto. Then again there is a limitation here, because the judgment enforcement, when the UNSC is deciding that how we will enforce this judgment, then again the P5, any one of them or two of them, three of them, four of them, or all the five of them can veto, and then again the judgment can't be enforced. So this again shows the limitation of the ICJ. For example, again same example, that India won the case in the ICJ, and Pakistan says that I will not follow the verdict, I will not follow the final judgment of the court. Then India will go to the UNSC, right? Please enforce the judgment given by the ICJ. Then what happen? All the P4 will favor India, but China will always favor his or her close ally Pakistan, right? So China will say no, 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 I will veto from this. Then ultimately the final verdict can't be enforced. So this shows that ICJ also has limitations. So despite being the world court and all that, it has limitations, right? So we can say that ICJ, world court, is subjugate to the veto, right? In another manner, because ultimately if any member will veto, the verdict can't be imposed, or the final verdict can't be enforced on that particular party. So this also shows that veto has the ultimate authority in the whole UN system. So that's why UN need to be reformed to make other organs fully functional, right? So I hope you have completely understood the ICJ. If there are any doubts, you can tell us in the comment sections. We will try to cover all those doubts in the next video. For today, this was all about ICJ, and in the next episode, we will cover World Bank and IMF, two prominent institutions, right? So for today, thank you all. Stay safe, stay healthy. Till then, bye.